Okay, excellent. So I'm going to have a few questions for everyone, and it's really about prediction. So if you can share with us, and since it's a lot of speakers, I won't ask too many questions either, but what are the trends and changes you expect to see in 2012? What do you think is going to change next time we all get together here? And what are we going to talk about? What will be different?
Okay. You know, if I look at it in terms of the area that I was discussing earlier, I think we saw some interesting use cases from Matt and what they're deploying at IU in an enterprise-type environment. I think as we move through 2012, and if we have another show in the fall, we'll be able to see more use cases, more compelling use cases in which OpenFlow is being deployed in maybe more creative ways to solve other problems versus what we've seen today. Specifically in the enterprise. If you look at some of the other areas like the data center and service provider space, I think that we'll have quite a few production deployments in some respects, you know, in load balancing and these types of applications in those types of environments.
I think, or maybe just I hope, but you know, I hope there are more folks like me up here next time around talking about things they've actually done with this and how they solve problems.
Some bearded guys, you
mean? I would echo our other two speakers. I think, but what we'll see in a year from now will be dramatically more use cases that have been vetted that will be deployed, and I think we'll find a whole slew of new products that are out there from some vendors that we all know and love, and some from some new vendors that we don't know quite yet.
Thank you. From my perspective, I think what we're seeing today in the field is a lot of interest in this new technology. There's a lot of promise. I think what we would need in the coming year is really maturity of the solutions being offered by the ecosystem. So by that, what I mean is that I expect to see the controller piece getting a lot more mature and being available for POCs, for deployments, and on the switch side, I also expect the vendors to come up and give more feature-rich offerings. So specifically, today, most of the implementations are at OpenFlow 1.0, which is kind of the base. And we have new standards, specifically 1.2 and 1.3 is coming out. So expect vendors to implement to those standards which have new features that our customers need. So with those two key components, I will expect the industry to mature a lot more.
In the past 2 years, Arista Networks has created a lot of penetration in places like algorithmic trading, low latency trading, high frequency trading. And so because of this very low latency, they've gotten a lot of adoption in those particular areas. What I've also observed is the folks that are using these have noticed that all their command line tools are written in Python. And that has created a whole new awakening of what's possible, not just in terms of configuring the switches, but enabling automation and developer access. Looking forward, a number of the things I talked about in my presentation are merchant silicon will start to become more visible and more deployed. Lots in the Web 2.0 world, and we're hoping that the enterprise world kind of takes notice of this and gets a sense of what they can do. So that's what I'm seeing coming up in the next 18 months.
I think we're going to see a lot more work that needs to be done. This includes things like management tools, interfaces to service provision offerings, and then interfaces to user applications. I'm considering this good news, that we'll find out more work that needs to be done because it means people are getting closer and closer to widespread commercialization.
So I see two different things here. First of all, a lot of maturity of the various different components that are involved with SDN. And secondly, I think we should get a lot of feedback from the experimentation, the pilots and the betas that are happening all around the world in terms of actual live SDN deployment.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start with you, so we'll come back this way. But a lot of discussion we've made around, it has an impact behind networking. It has an impact to the server administration, to the security people. And as we said, those organizations are not necessarily working together. And we had a couple of questions and comments about what is the role of the network manager, Peter touched on it, and Matt, you got the question, but I'd like to get the opinion of everyone about what's going to be different if I'm a network manager and I start implementing software-defined network in my network. What new skills am I going to be able to develop, and what existing skills I can leverage?
So I think the network manager is going to be way better off than today. He or she is not going to work in isolation, being isolated from the various services that they're supporting. They'll be working very much in concert with the very application and services they're supporting. So I'm sure that they can meet the needs and demands of the application services they're supporting much better than what they can do today. So I think it's going to make their life a lot easier than what they have today.
I think it all depends on how threatened they feel. And I think that if the IT manager in charge of software, servers, and applications decides, well, networking now is part of my domain, then there's going to be some tension there between those two. But I think the network managers that understand that they want to enable the software programming of their networks will find themselves more valuable in their enterprises.
At the risk of repeating some of the stuff I've already said, I don't see the role of network manager ever going away. There'll always be a need for it, but I think it's changing. If you look back in the days of when things went from mainframes to minis, minis to client server, now things are going to cloud, a lot of roles are going to ripple and change at the same time. And so I think the traditional type of network manager is going to peak and start to fade. And this new notion around everything being software defined and automated and highly repeatable in terms of like how you do software development, bill of materials, dependency now, I think that's the direction, and that's a big source of change.
Thank you. I think one of the things which would be interesting and I would look forward to is that the network admins then can, kind of abstract the network out and really work at the use case levels and not spend a lot of time managing each and every device like they do today. So if you look at the parallels, it has happened in the storage and the servers where they used abstractions. I mean, they don't deal with bits and bytes anymore on a day-to-day basis. I mean, they do, but that amount of work is reducing day by day. So our hope is that SDN will do the same for the network admins so that they can finally start paying more attention to the applications they want to serve rather than the bits and bytes of the network itself.
My sense of what's going to change for the network manager is that he's now going to be relevant, or she's going to be relevant to the line of business owner, which is for so long in networking, it was, at least when I would go visit customers, it would always be they report to the CIO somehow, and that's pretty much where it would stick. And shoot, if you were a vendor, that was pretty much where you were stuck as well. What I see happening is that it's now the line of business owners who actually control the budgets and are the folks that can get the benefit from being innovative will want to come talk to the network people and actually have them start to drive new initiatives and new projects.
So I would echo what everyone else said, but I'll add a little real world to that. So we have at least two full-time equivalents that do nothing but take requests for firewall changes and program those via SSH into a firewall. I don't see them doing that anymore. They're going to move up the value chain.
Yeah, I agree with some of the comments stated earlier. The other thing I see is when you look at like data centers and server administrators, network administrators, they've started working more closely together as we move to a more virtualized environment. There are obviously still barriers and silos, but I think OpenFlow is going to help, and SDN will help take down some of those and help generate more collaboration between the various IT groups. The other thing I think is definitely with the automation and stuff, enterprises will be able to lower their expense when it comes to IT headcount. I also think that as we move in the next few years to more application, user and application-based networks, the traditional certifications and things that network administrators need, very CLI, command line focused and stuff, may not be as relevant. So you're going to see those administrators somewhat threatened, in terms of having to evolve and adapt to these new application-based networks.
Okay, well, thank you. So there is a lot of angles actually we can see based on the skills level, the collaboration level, and also the relevance to the business. So one last question, and this is really, how to say, I know it's going to be reading a crystal ball here, but since we're talking about an ecosystem, we're talking about new tools coming available, applications that we cannot even think about today that will be able to interact with the network. There is something that may have to change on the way we go to market. Is there more a system integrator type of approach? Is it key players today will have to play a role of SDN enablers? What do you expect the dynamics to be? And I know it's very early at this stage, but just to get a feel from where you see the direction as the users, how you would like this to be handled from a support perspective and a go-to-market, and as a vendor, how do you see it coming into your own space?
So I think, if you look at like enterprise customers, they're always looking for solutions. It's always about the solution sale, not just like a point product or a point application. So from a vendor standpoint, we're going to be looking at, how we can solve the problems facing our customers, and a lot of the problems are very traditional in terms of reducing cost, increasing reliability, and things like this. So in order to deliver that, we're going to have to look at, beyond just the physical infrastructure, beyond just the hardware, but provide an end-to-end solution from the application, the control aspect, down to the hardware. And I think that you're going to see and I'm speaking from more of an infrastructure standpoint, but other infrastructure vendors also looking more at the whole solution going forward.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of customers. I think for us, we see buying the purchasing process working much more like the server process today, where you pick a chipset, you pick a packager, you pick your virtualization, you build it all the different layers, and you're your own system integrator. I think a lot of people will go that way, but I agree with Steve that that most enterprises are going to want something bundled either from a system integrator or from one vendor.
I think one of the things that we see is that people are going to want to become more increasingly educated online around what SDN is and network virtualization, and will start to either want to download either test packages, or let's say download complete actually production packages that they could test on their own in their own environment. And that's part of the reason that we started to drive SDNcentral.com, which is to provide all these resources so that people could learn those. But we also see that changing some of the buying patterns in terms of, for open source, the ability just to go download and install and run it. For commercial software, we see that there's going to be a segment of the market that may actually just buy these technologies online after playing with them on their own and with themselves. Now, obviously, as you move to a bigger and bigger purchase, you'll work with your systems integrator. But we see that early education process being increasingly driven online and through information gathering.
Thank you. I think at the end of the day, the most important thing, at least in my opinion, about SDN is the API that it would provide for other partners to come in an ecosystem to develop and provide new services and applications and integration of business applications into the network. So from that perspective, if you have an ecosystem where you can build your services based on open APIs or standard APIs, that would be a critical part for the success of SDN.
From my perspective, the big enabler here is automation. So in order to have a competitive, functionally equivalent internal cloud, you have to be as self-service and automated as an external cloud. And in order to do that, everything's got to be software driven. And so what I see starting to happen is this is just like the old days when the move from Spark and Solaris to x86 and Linux. There were some initial attempts to try to get the new stuff to work with the old stuff, and it doesn't. So what I'm seeing happening is people, as they deploy these internal clouds, they're going to be separate physical parts of the organizations and of the operational infrastructure, just like the change from mainframes to minis and minis to client server. The shift to cloud is going to kind of embody all this stuff.
Well, I'm not a vendor of products, certain other things. So I will observe this. As the Open Networking Foundation has seen its membership really surge, I find I'm talking to people who do different things than initially. We've had a lot of interest from engineers and implementers who think this technology is cool and fascinating, and they want to learn more about it, to people who want their particular product to do better, to people who want their company to do better, now to people who want to procure equipment and services to achieve their business ends. So I'm finding the variety of people that I'm talking to when they come to me or I meet them, much higher, more fundamental business questions around this rather than just technology questions.
As a provider of a web service, we would definitely like to see SDN APIs available for the WAN so that we can get more users online.
Okay. I would like to open this up to anyone in the room who has a question for the panel as well. After the whole day and all the session and all the different perspectives, don't tell me you know it all already, right? I'm sure we missed something.
Harry, you're a speaker. Come on up.
I can't get away that easily.
Yeah.
So my name is Dominique Jodouin from Noviflow. One of the things that I've been noticing in the last years is the IT industry is now generating more greenhouse gases, global warming, than the whole airline industry. And the problem is that it's accelerating now. So we're working now we're from Montreal in Canada, and we're working now in the context of SDN on a project to try to demonstrate how you could actually get some enormous savings in emission of gases using SDN and OpenFlow. And I was curious if any of you and your different work in the last year have been involved in any of those type of application of software-defined networks, and like keen to hear about it now, and also perhaps collaborate if you have some hooks into that as well after the presentation. Thank you.
Anyone wants to start? Anyone working on green technology?
So I definitely, that resonates with me. The SDN really does give you the ability to get more granular and add more programmability to the network and take advantage of times and things when you could adjust the network in order to take advantage of energy savings. A lot of vendors using today's technologies have implemented various power saving features using network management software. Whether it's turning off PoE devices during off business hours in the enterprise campus. I think that you're going to see more of that with SDN. It gives you a finer degree of granularity. There's a lot of different things you can do around shaping your traffic in order to save energy, given time of day and given different loads and various aspects. So it's definitely something I think vendors will be looking at on the data center. It may be very significant as well.
Well, at last fall's summit, Deutsche Telekom talked about how they were using SDN to save energy costs in their data center. But to address your question a little more broadly, there is somebody here today, I don't know whether he's in this session or the one next door, from Lawrence Livermore Laboratory working on the Earth Sciences Network. And he might be better poised to answer that question than we are.
Well, actually, I will add. I'm taking my hat off of the panel management to being one of the speakers, but I would add with a higher level of granularity and control, and also back to the presentation about over-provisioning. If you over-provision, it's so much more equipment to turn on, to maintain, than if you can manage your pool of resources more accurately and actually more dynamically. You definitely don't have this problem. So by de facto, even if we just use SDN and OpenFlow in a very basic way, you should be able to save. And then, of course, you can decide to go to the next level, which is what Steve described, with a better visibility and then a better perspective just within this business idea in mind.
Can I just say once again, the gentleman I was referring to is sitting 2 rows behind you, from Lawrence Livermore. So you want to answer this question? Are you using it to reduce greenhouse gases or climate change? Here comes a mic.
This is what we call the ecosystem and the community for SDN.
So definitely greenhouse gases and reducing that is something which we feel is very important, and we have been doing a lot of initiatives in that way. there was a workshop we organized at Supercomputing last year to talk about that. I think there are multiple ways by which SDN can help. I think there are some that have also been demonstrated by Nick McEwen's students on something called Elastic Tree within the data center, which was done, I think, in collaboration with HP, which shows that if you can move traffic and I mean, in the end, what SDN is providing you is an ability to move traffic to optimize a certain purpose. So if you can move it for a purpose of energy savings, you can do that. If you want to move it for the purpose of meeting an SLA, then you can do that. So that multivariance, what you get of control, of optimizing a certain parameter is what SDN gives you. So definitely you can use that for energy savings if that's the biggest problem that you're trying to solve. Now, how do you optimize it across all dimensions is something that as the software gets more sophisticated, you'll be able to do it. And that optimization problem is what scientists or mathematicians solve all the time. I don't know if that addresses your question, Dan, but...
Well, it was their question. Now, I'm not sure you want to fight that because pretty soon you're going to have tropical beaches and wine growing in Ontario and Quebec, so...
Harry,
not to
you
mention
wanted to add something?
none of it.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that in the business agility use case example I was talking about, clearly one of the use cases we spoke of was planned maintenance, but taking it to your point for essentially power optimization, if 60% of your operating expense involves the compute resources and powering those, the ability to essentially use the network to facilitate moving those compute resources to where perhaps you want to shut down a third of your data center, then clearly having SDN in place to cooperate with A, the compute management, and B, the storage management, which is what I was talking about. So SDN is ideal when you want to tackle that problem to get into the whole compute network storage stack orchestration. And that's key to doing better greenhouse management. Okay.
Anybody else? Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mark Davidson at Cisco. I do market research. And since this is about the future, what do you guys see as the role of, say, cloud in OpenFlow, say like a cloud-based OpenFlow controller or a cloud-based OpenFlow application, or maybe generalize that to software-defined networks?
That's interesting.
So I think what you raise is a very valid point, especially when you look at the use of SDN in the WAN. So clearly you don't want to have your controllers in one data center or two data centers. You want to have it scattered across the WAN so that even if one data center goes down, your controller is still up and running. So basically you could think of, say, using your own infrastructure for running your controllers, your own data centers, or you could think of using the public cloud for running your controllers. Right? It offers another dimension in terms of availability and robustness, because your own infrastructure could fail, yet you could have the public cloud up and running in terms of your controllers. And you could use a mix of both also. Nothing really stops you from using that.
This is number 3. So another thing comes to mind. We haven't talked about this at all today, but who is going to manage home networks? The way it is today, if you don't have a teenage boy, you don't have a system administrator in the house. And it's going to get worse. Everyone's trying to introduce products to manage the home network, and it's just a nightmare. Well, I think this is going to make it possible, and it's going to be some third-party provider, and I want an interface to that so that I can use a great user interface to make sure that my kids have access to this or not access to that. However I want to manage, whether it's my energy or my entertainment, that's not going to be something I host. That's going to be cloud-based, no question.
And maybe to add to Dan's comment, which was, so my previous gig before I turned into consultant and was not a vendor, was I was the co-founder and CEO of a company called Pareto Networks, where we had taken the control plane, moved it into the public cloud, where we had it replicated across 5 different data centers. And what we learned through that is that you have to be very smart about what use cases will work from that type of remote infrastructure versus what needs to be there because of the first packet and the latency issues that are there. But there's absolutely ways that you can scale it, and it's definitely in production today. I mean, if you look at, it's not being used by OpenFlow today, but it would be very easily to adapt to something that's like, say, like what Meraki's doing, or Aerohive, who acquired Pareto, or a bunch of the other folks that are going off to go do that. So there are some very scalable and very interesting things that you could do to apply OpenFlow to a cloud-based controller.
Well, maybe I will add that the OpenFlow controller is a software. I mean, every time we represent it, it may look like an appliance, but it's really a software, and it can be in any form factor, VMs up to an appliance, and it can definitely be in the cloud. Like when we talk about private versus public cloud, and why you made your decision based on high availability, if you want control, you don't want control. I think the same question will have to be answered about how important for you is it to have your own controller or to share it. And also, because we decouple to Matt's point in the wireless, you decouple already the control from the forwarding plan. If you need performance, you can still have the forwarding plan and packet process, locally, and then just have the control information updated. It depends also on the patterns of your traffic, how frequently you have to update the forwarding tables, for instance.
Yeah, I think that is a very interesting question. I think most of the people on the panel have addressed some of the various aspects of that. I did want to highlight, though, that there is research going on in this area of potentially having multiple controllers, distributed controllers. HP Labs is actually doing some research on something they call Hercules, which is a control framework for basically synchronizing the state between multiple controllers, which may be doing the same function or different functions. So this type of research will probably eventually lead to productization and enable some of these use cases in which you may have a controller in a public cloud and a private cloud, and may need to leverage both.
And just to add to this, I'm sorry, I'm speaking too much as usual. But on top of the multi-controller, actually, you can even think about federated SDN network, where your carriers for the wide area network is SDN, your own private cloud is SDN, and maybe you exchange information to expand it and to exchange control information as well to optimize behind your own network. I mean, this is futuristic. We're talking about prediction, so I'm throwing this out there for you to think about it. Far from being done, but as SDN adoption becomes more pervasive, why not? Anyone?
I just add one point. I tend to look at it at a little higher level, more at the application level inside of a cloud. And we very frequently look at, I need to move a group of workloads or guest OSs from an internal cloud to an external cloud. So these hybrid models are really the thing that's kind of fascinating. And at that level, the focus is layer 2 over layer 3 and virtualization at that layer, not down at the data and control plane.
So Dan mentioned using OpenFlow potentially in a home network environment. Are you guys aware of what support there is for OpenFlow in home switches and routers?
I'd be glad to answer this one, actually. Because there is an open source firmware called Indigo that was actually on the list of Peter in his slides. And OpenFlow does not require that much CPU or memory, actually, and it could very well be implemented on a regular Netgear type of switch, which actually we saw some demos done with this. I don't know if it was at Interop or in the lab or others, with Indigo being just downloaded. It's an open source software on a Netgear device. So it is in the realm of the possible. I don't think it is commercially implemented, but absolutely it has been demonstrated at Interop Lab, I think, last year.
You can also download OpenWRT, which is the original Linksys code, which there is an OpenFlow plugin for that as well. So if you already have I believe a version of Netgear or the actual old OpenWRT or literally any Linux box, you could go ahead and start to play with that today from your home network.
I think it's an interesting use case. I don't know. I'm trying to think of how in a home environment you could realize a lot of benefits from implementing OpenFlow. It's just not at the scale of some of the other environments we've talked about. But I definitely see value in. I think someone had mentioned potentially having like a cloud provider managing the home network and providing that programmable interface. It probably doesn't need to be as dynamic, but maybe over the WAN or something, there's some dynamic aspects of it. But in a home network, in general, I think a lot of the applications today are handled fairly well.
I mean, you could probably extend the same thing to the enterprise. If you're a small and medium business, maybe you don't want to really manage all your networking infrastructure. So you could have a cloud-based service that is actually managing all your networking infrastructure. You can define business policies, rules, access control, everything in the cloud.
Can I interject a comment here?
Microphone, Krey.
We'll look at the home gateway as a use case, and one good implementation will be allocating bandwidth. Given that I have like multiple devices in a home environment, and different type of devices, maybe like bandwidth allocation, how you can actually allocate and assign bandwidth to different devices might be a good use case.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, there are definitely use cases around that. If you look at like home gateways, IPTV, and these various use cases using OpenFlow, you could better utilize the resources available on the home network. When you want to turn on the TV and watch a certain channel, you can activate that flow on the device and provide the right policies.
Any other questions from everyone? Okay, well, thank you so much for being so dynamic, interested, and curious throughout the day and asking questions. Please, join me in thanking all the speakers today for all the presentations they shared with us. And I really hope you're going to have a fantastic Open Networking Summit moving forward tomorrow and on Wednesday, and that we'll see you there. Thank you, everyone.